Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson, your host, speaking at you from Sunday, November 10th, 2024 in the space and time continuum. But apparently in a whole different parallel universe than we were in a week ago. I really do not understand what happened. A lot of people don't. I don't know a single person who's happy about Trump winning the election. We saw it with our own eyes. Trump was running out of gas. Nobody was showing up at his rallies anymore. Kamala Harris had all the momentum and all the excitement. Tens of thousands of people coming and cheering. And Tim Walz did a great job. I am more sad that Kamala didn't win than I am scared and or mad that Trump did win. But I don't know what happened. I was running 100 miles an hour down a path, jubilantly looking forward to the glorious new times where we had our first woman president. And suddenly at about 9:30 p.m., somebody jumped out from behind a tree and had a 3-inch diameter pipe and swung it into my stomach. And I went down and I was laying in the gravel in pain for days. That must have been the moment I passed from the universe that we were in before into the one we're in now. We all passed into a parallel universe, it would seem. Now, I have since gotten up and brushed myself off, starting to try and figure out what's going on. It helps to talk to people. It helps to stay in touch. It helps to look into things, keep moving. I was very glad to hear my daughter Eve. She was very gutted over this. She cried for at least a whole day. And then my mom called me the next day and asked how I was doing. And she told me that Eve, my daughter, had texted to Eve's grandma, my mom, and said, "I'm doing all right. Now it's all about moving forward." So with the strength of people like my daughter Eve and others, I'm ready to do this. You've heard me on this show talk about that we're on a train going through a dark tunnel, but we see the light, and we're almost ready to pass through the light. And we were going to be completely in the light after November 5th. Now, I still think that's true. But when we came out of the tunnel, I was expecting to see an incredibly beautiful vista of, beautiful water with mountains and trees and flowers, and instead, we came into a valley. We came out of the dark tunnel. The darkness left. We came into the light. It was sunny. It is sunny, but we're in a valley. And jumping out of the darkness is some remnants of it. They jumped onto the train and they're trying to fight with us. But they're all idiots. So, it's like Stephen Miller saying, I have a plan to strip everyone of their citizenship and then we're going to kick everybody out of the United States. Okay, doink, push him off the train. This is what's happening. Tom Nichols from The Atlantic writes, paradoxically, however, Trump's reckless venality is a reason for hope. Trump has the soul of a fascist, but the mind of a disordered child. He will likely be surrounded by terrible but incompetent people. All of them can be beaten in court, in Congress, in state houses around the nation, and in the public arena. America is a federal republic, and the states have ways to protect their citizens from a rogue president. Nothing is inevitable, and democracy will not fall overnight, says Tom Nichols. Just what happened? One thing to point out, this is Ian Millhiser. He says, my outrageous take for today is Biden is a very effective president. Harris was a strong candidate. The U.S. economy is strong, and Harris outperformed incumbent parties in similar nations by 20-plus points. It just wasn't enough in a post-pandemic world where incumbents are screwed, except he used a different word. This is also a world where I don't think we quite understand how strong the mis- and disinformation is. And I think we're learning about that. So what else can we do as an analysis? Now, I have no idea how we could have 15 to 20 million less voters when we were seeing with our own eyes that this was going to be an incredible, everyone was saying it was going to be a record-breaking turnout. We were seeing it happening. And we have less? By 15 to 20 million? Trump got basically what he got last time, and then we got 20 million less? I don't understand. And if there's something nefarious that caused that, I don't know that we can count on finding out what that is and changing anything. So I'm not going to hold out that kind of hope for that kind of thing. I think we would be letting ourselves in for even more disappointment if we count on something like that. And even if something like that is going on, it would be very good and smart and healthy for us to analyze ourselves. The sad thing is the Republicans just go off of fear and entertainment level kind of BS. The Democrats have to be super careful. We have to do, every word has to be perfect. That's not fair to begin with. The Republicans have an easy job of just yelling and screaming whatever they feel like that is going to get people's attention, entertain people, get people fired up, get people scared. We have to try and explain to people reality and what the government is actually here to do. So let's start by reflecting on ourselves. And I have been, and I want to play for you some things that other people, I'm searching for anything that can help. And there are people saying some really, I think, helpful and enlightening things. This is Democratic strategist Julie Roginski.
I'm going to speak some hard truths to my friends in the Democratic Party. This is not Joe Biden's fault. It's not Kamala Harris's fault. It's not Barack Obama's fault. It is the fault of the Democratic Party in not knowing how to communicate effectively to voters. We are not the party of common sense, which is what the message that voters sent to us. For a number of reasons. We don't know how to speak to voters. When we address Latino, and language has meaning. When we address Latino voters as Latinx, for instance, because that's the politically correct thing to do. It makes them think that we don't even live on the same planet as they do. When we are too afraid to say that, hey, college kids, if you're trashing a campus at Columbia University because you're unhappy about some sort of policy and you're taking over a university, and you're trashing it and preventing other students from learning, that is unacceptable. But we're so worried about alienating one or another cohort in our coalition that we don't know what to say when normal people look at that and say, wait a second, I send my kids to college so they can learn, not so that they can burn buildings and trash lawns, right? And so on and so forth. When we put pronouns after names and say she, her, as opposed to saying, you know what, if I call you by the wrong pronoun, call me out, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But stop with the virtue signaling and just speak to people like they're normal. There's nothing I'm going to say to you that I'm not going to say to somebody else. I speak the same language to everybody. But that's not what Democrats do. We constantly try to parse out different ways of speaking to different cohorts because our focus groups or our polling shows that so-and-so appeals to such and such. That's not how normal people think. It's not common sense. And we need to start being the party of common sense again. Joe Biden is not responsible for that. Neither is Kamala Harris. It is a problem that Democrats have had for years. I've been banging the drum on this for, I don't know how, probably 10 years, if not longer on this. We need to get back to being the party of common sense, that people look at us and say, we understand you. We appreciate what you say because you speak our language. And until we do that, we should stop blaming other people for our own mistakes.
I think that's a very good point. I know that with the indigenous people in the United States, we've been calling them Native Americans for a long time because we decided that was more appropriate. Actual Native American people, they call themselves Indians, usually. They prefer that or indigenous, the indigenous people that were here. Why don't we let them choose what to be called? Why do we always have to choose what to call people? It's almost like we're telling them, here's what we're going to call you, because we're the ones who are here for you. That's pretty pretentious. And what she was talking about pronouns, you saw the Republican Party exploit that with tremendous success. We just try and be kind to everybody, but we don't have to make up what we're going to call you. Right down to that, okay, say it. Healthcare is a human right. Say it. We're challenging you to say what we think. Now, I do think healthcare is a human right. And I think that's what we should say. I think pointing that out, I think, is good and smart. But when we try and punish other people because they're not saying it the same way we are, I think that's not working for the Democratic Party. Here is another very interesting take from Stephen A. Smith. He's actually a sportscaster, and also he's a black guy. If you notice, first of all, black people voted for Kamala. They did not go toward Trump the way everyone was saying they were going to. Black people came out and voted the right way, and they have been for decades. I don't know why white women would vote for Donald Trump, but apparently they're saying that's what happened. But black people, they come from it as, hey man, we've been with a boot on our neck for centuries. We've been oppressed and mistreated for centuries in this country. We're used to it. We're just waiting for when all you white people choose the right thing so that we can all have nice things. But we know how to survive in this. Now, of course, that's me putting something onto them, but I only know that because I've heard them talk about it, including this week. A lot of that kind of sentiment. So here is what Stephen A. Smith has to say.
Stephen A., your thoughts on the election as it just went down?
I was surprised at how lopsided it was. I was not surprised by the outcome. Mm-hmm. Right. I saw the outcome coming from a mile away. You have to take into account, listen, we respect our president, Joe Biden, but here's the reality. He got into office. He promised to be a transitional president, to be a stopgap to pave the way for somebody else to come on board. Into the midterms, it was supposed to be a red wave. It did not happen. The Democrats were flying high. He felt the momentum because he was the incumbent. And instead of leaving, he decided to stay. Yeah. When he decided to stay, the Democrats were in a quandary because they were expecting him to leave. Now he wants to stay. They're around him. They're seeing the fastball has dissipated to some degree. They're seeing that he's not what he used to be. And what do you do about it? You grease the skids. There's no primary for him to experience. You let him go on stage June 27th, and clearly he was exposed. 3.5 weeks later, he's forced and compelled to step away because donors to the Democratic establishment, they were not going to support that. And then Kamala Harris is inserted. I don't blame her one bit. Same. I thought she did a phenomenal job. Yep. She went all out. She did what she could. Yep. But you can't overcome that kind of situation. And remember, there's 2 C words that are incredibly important in America. Capitalism is one. Mm-hmm. Competition is another, because it's a metaphor for capitalism in a lot of people's eyes. Because you were inserted, even though you were the vice president and it was the Biden-Harris administration, you had folks who are independent. I'm not talking about those on the right, and I'm not talking about those on the left, just independents, who said, wait a minute, she didn't experience a primary either. And the last time we saw her in a primary was 4 years ago, and she didn't even make it to Iowa. They used that as an excuse to point to her level of inexperience. Then you got the war in Russia and Ukraine. You got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas and Hezbollah and all of that stuff. And you had Trump using codes. Look, do you want her? Where is she? Where's the interviews? Where is she showing herself? Where's the tough questions? Where's the interrogation? And he leaned on certain things. And you knew people were going to gravitate to that because right now, as divided as our country is, fear comes associated with that. And because that fear was there, he fed off of it.
Yeah.
And people bought it, hook, line, and sinker.
Fear. He said it right there again. What I was kind of talking about. Fear works easily. That's the easy way to do it.
And Stephen, let me ask you, because I agree on all counts. There's a lot to unpack of what kind of went wrong for Democrats here. I think a factor is the working class feeling left behind, not reaching out to rural Americans. But what do you identify as what Democrats got wrong? And it seems like you agree Biden maybe should have stepped aside sooner.
He definitely should have stepped aside. I said it a year ago. I was on camera. Everybody was getting on me. I said it a year ago. You need to step aside. And see, this is where covering sports puts me at a distinct advantage. I cover people every day where it's time for you to go, but you're holding on and you don't want to leave. People who cover the world of sports are accustomed to seeing that all the time. And so now here you are the left, you leaned and you were a prisoner to the extreme left in a lot of people's eyes. Well, guess what? Most of America doesn't operate on the fringes. Whether you're left or you're right, you're relatively centrist. You believe in compromise, negotiation, working with one another. Nobody gets to get everything they want. The problem is those on the fringes continuously push for you to get everything you want. They're not about getting things done. They're about getting their way. And if they're not going to get their way, they're about complaining and griping about it. I'm pretty liberal. Live and let live, okay? But you had folks on the left that were introducing some things when we got in the whole transgender issue and they were talking about bathrooms or they were talking about males transitioning to females and competing against girls in sports and stuff like that. These
That's less than 1% of the population.
I understand that.
But you know what? That's
ridiculous.
But I think that's where the mistake is made. You're saying it's ridiculous. I don't disagree with you. But most of the voters out there don't think like that.
But that means they don't have the information.
Okay, but 90% of the voters don't have the information. If you're out there busting your tail to make ends meet and to pay your bills and you're going to work every day and you got a family to take care of and you're in New York City, you're getting stuck 2 hours of your day, you're stuck in traffic. You understand? You got a whole bunch of stuff to go through. You don't have time to know what you and I know.
Here is his perspective, and we were just mentioning indigenous people. Many of the different communities that were indigenous here in the United States before us white men came and took over, they put women in charge. Women had a lot more power. Women ran most of the households, if that's what you want to call it. And men were supposed to just go and hunt, primarily. But here, Stephen A. Smith is asked about men. This is on The View, by the way, if you couldn't tell. This is on the show The View. And he's asked by somebody saying, okay, so men being so misogynistic.
Because Howard Stern says that he wasn't confident that the country was ready to elect the first female president because he knows, quote, how men talk behind closed doors about us. So we're very privileged to have a great guy here today. Tell her, what do men say about us behind closed doors?
Well, first of all, here's the deal. I respectfully disagree with Howard Stern, only from the standpoint that I wish he had been more specific. Why don't you say white men? Because let me tell you something about black men. We love our mamas.
I know that.
We revere black women. And when we're trifling, we know it's us. It's not them. You understand? So when he's saying that, okay, well, then let's talk about white men. We have a white power structure that still exists in this country today. I understand the white populace in this country was over 85% at one time. It's now dipped to about 57.4%. The white power structure is still in place. So when we talk about misogyny, when we talk about chauvinism, when we talk about women not necessarily being empowered, well, who's in a position of power to surrender some of that power? It's white men. So I think that when Howard Stern was talking, I can't speak to what white men are thinking. I can tell you this much. Black men, we revere women. We don't have any problem looking at a woman as a leader.
Don't have any problem looking at a woman as a leader. You heard Tim Walz make this same sentiment on the campaign trail. He said something like, my life hack. My life hack is, men, if you surround yourself with 5 smart women, then you'll be doing just fine. I'm working on my Tim Walz. Working on that imitation. I got to get it's not really a Minnesota accent that he does. I can do the Minnesota, but he's from Nebraska. Anyway, and Heidi told me too, she never wants to hear me do Donald Trump again. It's going to be hard because I do it I automatically now. It's like wired into me, but I'm so sick of Donald Trump. I don't want to see him or hear him. I don't want to imitate him. I want to ignore him. I think that's what everybody should do. So she said, work on your Tim Walz imitation, because I know you love doing different voices. Work on your Tim Walz and replace Donald Trump with Tim Walz. Anyway, okay, we don't have enough time to do everything I wanted to talk about. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the media, and then I want to go into why we shouldn't be so scared of this whole Trump thing. Again, I reference back to the beginning of this where I mentioned that, he's going to be surrounded by a bunch of idiots, more so than he was in 2016. And we are so much more prepared. And by that, I mean lawyers, courts, everybody. So we're going to be fighting against this better than we were ready to back the last time it happened, because we've had this fear that this might happen now for years. And we've been putting a lot of thought into it. A lot of smart people have been putting a lot of thought into it. And all of the smart people have left the Republican Party. They only have idiots. So it's a lopsided fight in our favor. Even if we don't have Congress, let's take a short break. You're listening to A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson. We'll be right back. Satellite View. Todd Mikkelson, your host, with you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I expect we'll have less downloads this time because I think some people are like, I'm not going to go back into politics yet. But I still, and I almost wasn't going to do this show. I was like, I can't. I just can't. I can't. But I mean, I felt I've hardly been able to eat all week, and just physically felt sick. I'm better now, but for most of the week, anyway, I felt like, no, we got to talk. We got to do this. We got to get back on the horse, so to speak. We got to pick ourselves up and brush ourselves off. We got to do this. So here I am. And if you're here with me, thank you so much. Now we're going to go into a little bit more of helping each other get through this chaos. First of all, though, I want to point out the media. If there's anybody to blame, because I don't blame Joe Biden, I don't blame Nancy Pelosi, I don't blame Kamala Harris or Tim Walz or the circumstances of, I mean, now in retrospect, it would have been maybe better if Biden dropped out earlier, but then what a primary would have been chaotic and blah, 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 blah. I think talking about that till we're blue in the face is not going to help anybody. I think talking about the things we did in the first half here, reflecting on ourselves, I think is helpful. If there's anyone to blame, it's the media. You've heard me talk about this a lot, the media shift. We need to shift, and I think that the mainstream media realizes this, and they are getting hit. I want to read to you from the Philadelphia Inquirer. The American mainstream media and its vital watchdog role that once made it a trusted major institution in a flawed yet functioning democracy imploded in 2024, and it happened in two ways: gradually and then suddenly. The sudden part came in the days immediately after the October 25th revelation that the Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos, the third richest person on earth, had spiked his editorial board's long-planned endorsement of Democrat Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. The same story played out at the billionaire-owned Los Angeles Times and USA Today and 200 other newspapers that share its owner, the publicly traded Gannett Corporation. So hundreds of papers owned by Gannett decided at the last minute they were all going to endorse Kamala Harris. But no, instead they went with the candidate who branded a free press the enemies of the people. And then at least 250,000 people canceled their Washington Post subscriptions in a business that was already reeling. But the gradual destruction of public trust in the traditional media has been every bit as powerful. You could watch its final days among the last mostly liberal holdouts who still gathered on the once free-flowing social media site called Twitter that Elon Musk, the richest person on earth, bought and turned into a disinformation cesspool called X now. You saw the steady drips of distrust over the sane washing of the 78-year-old Trump's increasing unhinged rants and discretions into Hannibal Lecter, shark attacks, blah, blah, blah. After the headlines proclaiming that record low unemployment was bad news for President Joe Biden. All of these kind of headlines were driving me crazy. Back to the article. For a lot of forward-thinking folks who believed in the power of a free press and have been urging journalists to do better since George W. Bush was allowed to lie America into a senseless war, the non-endorsements were not a shock, but the last straw. And now, even more folks are checking out in disgust after Trump's solid majority win last Tuesday. They've abandoned the elite mainstream media, newsrooms like the Post and New York Times, the traditional TV networks, and the non-conservative cable outlets like MSNBC and CNN at a moment when pollsters had already found public trust at an all-time record low of 31%. You've heard me talk about the Midas Touch. The Midas Touch has more listeners than Fox News at times. And the Midas Touch started 4 years ago with non-professional journalists. It was some lawyers, brothers. And now they've got the best shows that you can find, the best informational shows, news and politics. And that's what I don't watch CNN. Here's another thing I want to read to you. This is the Dworkin report. Scott Dworkin started doing what he's doing about 8 years ago because he saw the problems going on with the media not covering Trump. I mean, ugh. So I want to read, Scott Dworkin released this on November 9th. It's been an extremely difficult week. I wanted to thank you for everything you do. You truly inspire me and keep me going. I've got your back. Thanks for having mine. Like so many of you, I expected a big win on Tuesday and the opportunity to continue building on the success of the Biden administration. It was soul-crushing when I saw it wasn't going to turn out that way. Our post-election plan needed to be overhauled to focus on fighting Trump, so I immediately got back to work. One of the most important lessons I've learned from 8 years of helping lead the resistance against Trump is that you can never get started too early. When Trump first ran in 2016, the press failed miserably to investigate and report on his horrible past. They were too busy parroting his every word and spreading his lies unchecked. So I took it upon myself, spending years uncovering thousands of videos, photos, and documents. We helped reveal Trump's mob ties and his shady dealings in dozens of foreign countries, including decades of making money from Russia. I investigated over 100 people in Trump's orbit, finding evidence that would be used against his allies, his administration, and members of Congress. One of the things our Watchdog Coalition will be doing is looking into every senior member of the incoming administration, since we can't trust the press to do that. For us, no controversy is too small, and no lie should go unchecked. We will be a fierce and relentless force against everything Donald does. We will never bend to Trump. We will never break bread with him, and we will never accept him to be anything other than a felon and a fraud who belongs in prison. I know Donald Trump will be harder to deal with this time, but we're weathered, battle-tested, and stronger than ever before. We cannot and will not let Trump just become a dictator. We'll constantly be coming up with new ways to block his horrible agenda. This will be the newly expanded purpose of our Watchdog Coalition, to fight back against Trump and hold the press accountable every day in every way we can. There are already dozens of organizations and leaders who have joined, and I want you to be a part of it. And then he asks you to get involved here, and you can subscribe and be a part of this community. You've heard me talk about Simon Rosenberg. He has the Hopium community. Thousands of people who worked very hard on this election. Now, he's talking about we're going to hold them accountable. First of all, we're going to run through the coals anybody that he chooses. You know, cabinet members have to be approved by the Senate. So then you think, okay, well, the Republicans have the Senate now. Yeah, but there has to be hearings. How do you think it's going to go when RFK Jr. is asked by Democratic senators, so did you kill the bear? And why did you leave it in Central Park? You say you thought it was funny? And how much of your brain was eaten by the worm? And your sex diary that your wife found and then committed suicide, what was that all about? There's more. There's more with him. You know, that's going to happen to all these idiots. Stephen Miller, Elon Musk. And then people like RFK Jr., they have to get security clearance. He's not going to be able to get a security clearance. Also, I saw Michael Popak from Midas Touch and Legal AF. And he's talking about getting legislation ready. He's a lawyer. Not legislation, getting litigation ready already now for when Trump tries to do any of this crap. First of all, he points out if Trump is going to arrest and indict Liz Cheney or Nancy Pelosi, all the people that he's named, that has to go to trial. And then there's a grand jury. There are juries involved. And then Liz Cheney, during her trial, do you want the details about what she went through in her investigation of January 6th? Do you want all those details to come out in court and be reported on? It's going to be a lot of changing of minds going on. And if you don't think that Donald Trump is already breaking his promises, he said, I almost did an imitation of him. I'm not going to do an imitation of him. But he said, the day after I'm elected, I will end the war within 24 hours in Ukraine. Okay, that would have been November 6th. That's a few days ago now, and nothing has changed over there. So he's already breaking all his promises. It's going to be really difficult. Oh, also, deporting at least 11 million people. Never in the history of human beings, or at least recorded history, has somebody taken 11 million people and moved them from one place to another. The estimates are that would be $315 billion. But the DOJ, who would be in charge of doing this, their entire budget is $50 billion. You see what I mean? There's 800,000 law enforcement in the whole country, from local police all the way up to FBI. There's 800,000 law enforcement officers. And you're expecting those people to move, to arrest and deport 11 million people. So you see how the math, none of this will work. None of it will work. All the crap he's saying is just unrealistic. Now let's talk about the fear. He's going to come and put us all in jail if we've ever said anything bad about him. This is Adam Kinzinger.
I do want to ask you, as someone who's been really outspoken against Donald Trump and the rhetoric that was used in the lead up to this against people like Liz Cheney and his former chief of staff, and you name the person who's come up against him, Nancy Pelosi and others. Are you concerned about retaliation?
Thank you for asking this question, because I have a lot of people asking it, and it's great to be able to address it. I am absolutely the opposite of concerned about retaliation. Let's be clear. My opinion hasn't changed. Donald Trump is a scared, weak person, and he won a big election. Congratulations. Again, I do hope he's successful for the sake of the country. But he himself, because I know him, he's a trembling, scared man. I am the opposite of, obviously I did nothing illegal, so you want to manufacture stuff? I'm sorry, it's still a democracy. You're not going to have that ability. Donald Trump's strength comes when he intimidates people with power he doesn't have. I know the power he doesn't have, and I am not intimidated by it. So no, thank you for asking me that, because I think other people kind of in this, is Donald Trump going to target you? Have to understand and have to speak out and say, no, we're not intimidated by him. Honest to God, it's the least intimidating person I know. And so, no, I'm not concerned whatsoever.
That's how they make you scared. They just try and intimidate you. But they're idiots. They're weak, little. That's what bullies are. They're insecure, weak, little. A lot of bad words that I can't choose one. They're like flipping off like at a casino. Ding, 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 ding. One bad word, another bad word. Bing. I can't choose. Yeah, they're going to put these people on trial for nothing. We have a lot to fight against them with. Here's something that's interesting. Last summer, the Supreme Court ended up repealing. They got rid of the Chevron doctrine. The Chevron doctrine basically took away the power of the administrative agencies, the heads of the administrative agencies. These are the administrative agencies that the Republicans hate. And that's why they repealed the Chevron doctrine. It basically says the head of the FDA can't just say that, for instance, we're going to stop, using vaccine. The head of Health and Human Services can't just say, oh, we're not going to put fluoride in the water. You see where this is going? So now we can use their own thing, their own overreach. They hate the government, but now they are the government. They passed the repeal of the Chevron doctrine that makes it so that the government has less power. Now they are the government. So when RFK Jr. says, we can pass a law that says, no, you don't have the right to do that. So even their own trying to tear down of things now we can use against them. We've got many paths to fight against them. We've got all the brains. They've got none. They've got no brains left. So I don't know. I am more sad that Kamala lost than I am scared or mad that Trump won. Because Kamala is what this country needs. She would have been the perfect leader for us going into this next era. And I could cry right now over how sad I am that she didn't win. And I should say she didn't win because she didn't lose. A lot of other crap made that happen. She could not have done any better. I don't think anybody could have done any better than she did, including choosing Tim Walz. So I am going to remain sad until she becomes president. Maybe in 4 years. I don't know. I mean, I'm still holding out hope. Some people are talking about that maybe that she might run for the governor of California. Well, that would be good too. She's an incredible person. She would have been so good for this country. So I'm so sad about that. But Trump is not scaring me. We're going to kick his fucking little ass. He is an insignificant little piece of shit. And we are going to overwhelm him. There will be a day when we never have to see or hear from him again. I just thought it was going to be now. But we will fight together. So I invite you to keep listening to this show. I am taking next week off. I'm going to be out of town. But I'll be back the week after that. So I invite you to come back and listen to A Satellite View. We will keep each other sane throughout this. We will make each other feel better throughout this. So I want to thank you so much for not giving up on it and being here listening to this episode. And I thank you so much for following this show. I hope that I help you through some of this stuff. That's really all I want to be doing. So, especially this week, thank you so much for listening. We'll speak at you in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.